Solidarity, y'all. Good to see you. Hello to those hello and welcome to those watching later. Um, yeah, so as the title says, I wanted to talk about tradition. So it's time to get trad-pilled. Um, so first, I think it's good if we give ourselves an idea what we're talking about. Um, so when we talk about tradition, we can't talk about tradition without talking about historical progress. Now, these things are antithetical. Um, Tradition is the thesis. Hey, Jawad, good to see you, comrade. Tradition is the thesis, and the antithesis, the antithesis, is historical progress. Now, if you have a linear view of history, then you'll see one of these as if you have a linear or circular view of history, you'll see one of these as optimal. If you have a circular view of history, then you'll probably see traditionalism as optimal. Hey, Falcone, welcome. Everyone, go check out Falcone. She has been putting out some amazing content lately. Go check it out. If I do say so myself, she's been making some good stuff. Go check her out. But and so I mean, if you have a circular view of history, then naturally you'll believe that tradition and tradition needs to be preserved at all costs, and that historical progress is dangerous. And that's where you get like reactionaries, conservatives, and fascists, those types of people. Yeah, anytime, comrade. And everyone should go watch our talk. We were talking about MRN youth organizing, and people's war. It's you can check it out. It's one of our previous streams. It's really good with Falcone. So definitely go check that out. But then you have people who have a straight line view of history, right? And these people think historical progress at all costs, at the same sort of in the same mindset, the antithesis to tradition, preserve it at all costs. They see historical progress skeptically. People who have this linear view of history see tradition skeptically, and they see it and they see historical progress at all costs as the only way. But I'm here to bring you the trad pill, the Marxism, the synthesis. Well, the synthesis is that we have to synthesize our tradition and our historical progress. So that means but why? Why? Many people say like the past was filled with hardships. It was terrible. And we've come so far now, and that we shouldn't be returning to these previous states. And I agree, we shouldn't be returning to any previous states. That would be ill-advised, to say the least. That's a very reactionary thing to do. But we also have to understand that as humans, everything through history, with our analysis of historical materialism and the spiral that is history, has been made up of these traditions and social interactions and social practice between humans and their environment. And through this, we've gained correct and incorrect ideas. So we have to look, there are some traditions that hold value in a world where historical progress is our goal as communists. Now, I said people who see history as a straight line said historical progress at all costs. Now, I'm saying historical progress. That's what we're about. If you're a Marxist, if you're a communist, you are aiming for historical progress. You are aiming for the Messianic age. You are aiming for communism, the end of history. You want to move history forward. But you also understand that you're not living in a linear world, and you have to understand where you came from and the traditions of the past. And so let me give you some examples of tradition that really have given us so much value. And I'm going to start somewhere near and dear to my heart, and is Judaism. And you'll know if you watch my Kabbalah and Talmud, the dialectics of that, and that stream with Ramiro, you'll know that the tradition of dialectics comes from the rabbinical tradition, and it comes from the Kabbalists. In our stories, it begins with Adam and Abraham. Now, we can leave that aside because our history is not the same as archaeological history and material history. It's different. And we acknowledge that. We're not fools. We're not literalists. Well, most of us aren't. But what we do have historical record of are thousands of years of rabbi practicing dialectics. And how could we possibly know this? Because the rabbi didn't write the Bible, didn't write the Torah, didn't write the oral law. They recorded the oral law, but they didn't write it. How do we know this? Well, we have the Talmud, and that's what I was talking about in that. And the tradition of the Talmud is where Hegel gets his dialectics, and it's where Marx and Engels and Lenin and us, everyone gets their dialectics. They get it from the tradition of the rabbi. Now, what about here in America? What tradition do we have that's good? Isn't this a settler colonial state? You're right. Any of the traditions that the settlers are promoting is either a fabricated one or a distortion of their traditions of their people back in Europe, in their homeland in Europe. But it's not the tradition of America. The traditions of America are indigenous peoples. And what we know is the preservation of their culture and of their traditions has given us the most special and enlightened people that have ever graced this continent, next to Black people. But their knowledge, the Black people's tradition comes from something that was forged through fire, and it's beautiful. But white people, in America, we don't have an American tradition. We don't have that. Black people do. They have Harriet Tubman. They have Paul Robeson, W.E.B. Du Bois. They have the Comrades on the Amistad. They have a long and deep. They have the Black Panther Party. They have Huey P. Newton, Fred Hampton. They have these people. They have a deep, amazing tradition. Indigenous people, their tradition is beautiful. If you look at the people who were colonized by the Spanish speakers, like the indigenous Latinos, they have preserved, like in Mexico, Dios de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, is a holding off of an indigenous death ritual that they incorporated into Catholicism, and it helps them preserve their culture and have a national identity, and to give themselves sovereignty from the Europeans in Spain. So there's use for these traditions, and you see indigenous people, they have deep traditions of primitive communism, which weren't that long ago in the context of production and in the context of history. It wasn't that long ago that indigenous people in the northeast of the US and in the southeast of Canada were practicing a form of non-hierarchical primitive production that was communist. And they have this tradition, and many of these traditions were preserved through religious faiths and their language, the way that they speak. So we have to preserve these traditions, and we have to combat anyone who are trying to destroy these traditions. Now, as white people, we can't try to impose ourselves on these traditions and try to say there's a certain way, but we have to stand with the people that need to preserve them and go forward. Now, I will say that tradition on its own can be a reactionary force and needs to have the idea. So if tradition comes with the idea of now we are going to liberate our people, well, this is a positive manifestation of tradition and historical progress. Like, these people are using this shared identity and culture and ideas from their past to unite around something and expel the colonizers. They did it all over Africa. They did it all over Africa with Patrice Lumumba and uh, um, Numkra. I can never say his name. And Milton Obote and Julius Nyerere. I can't pronounce a lot of these names, forgive me. But these people said, okay, we think that your Marxism is fantastic. Soviet Union and Europe, and we know what class struggle means, and we understand what decolonization and national liberation means. We're living it. But we have our own way. And our way is the African way. And sometimes it didn't work, and sometimes it did very much work. But what we have to understand is that it's the choice of these peoples, right? And so the idea of land back, for example, or New Africa, is the idea of synthesizing tradition and historical progress. Now, if an American, a white American, a settler American, tried to do the same thing, tried to take some sort of American tradition and build it in this land, it wouldn't be authentic. It's not organic. It's just not the way it works. Now, if these people wanted to build a culture that wasn't American necessarily, like Jews, for example, doing autonomous federations of national and cultural autonomy, many of whom are white, that's a whole different thing. You know, I like what Dark Zenobia says about whiteness. You know, it is very much a construct, while cultures like Irish, French, German, English, these people, their identity comes from thousands of years of tradition, right? Our identity is fabricated. That's the difference. And the only people in our country who don't have a fabricated identity are those who understand that my cultural identity is not tied to America or whiteness, it's tied to my ancestral traditions from Europe. And people who understand that the indigenous people and their idea of the future being synthesized with their tradition is organic and natural, and not an inorganic construct, but an organic construct. I mean, they're all constructs, but one of these is forced through chauvinism, European chauvinism, and the other one is an organic thing that was either built through struggle or just the fact that this is their home, you know? So we have to sometimes humble ourselves when we speak about historical progress in tradition. I know many, especially in the American context, many of the white young new radicals that are coming out of America are very anti-clerical and very anti-religious. And I get it. Many of them are LGBT. Many of them have seen, you know, the racism justified by tradition, the bigotry of the church justified by tradition, all these things justified by quote unquote tradition. And what they're not realizing is that there's a character to tradition. There's a character to tradition. Has it been synthesized with historical progress, or is it just a distortion of the historical properties of tradition, what they perceive to be their tradition? Because that's the thing. Another thing with people with this circular view of history, these people who see tradition as absolutely evil and not worth talking about at all. They don't understand that the tradition they're angry at is not even a real representation of tradition, because tradition can never be mirrored for what it once was. We have sort of this issue within the Jewish world where tradition is so very important to us. You know, it's our duty as Jews to preserve our culture and tradition. But we have some people who I'm very protective of, by the way, the ultra-Orthodox, right? Now, these are people who are trying their best to keep to what they believe is the most honest interpretation to the laws of God. The thing is that whenever you have this problem when people try to recreate tradition of the past that doesn't come out of any sort of organic historical progress, but is just someone trying to pull it out of that, is that it's always distorted. It's distorted. You can never recreate something faithfully, especially something that has been lost to the ages. And when you do, it's going to come out distorted and probably be a misrepresentation of what its original intent was in the first place. Thanks, ADN, and welcome. And so, and I understand why the ultra-Orthodox do this. I'm modern Orthodox myself. I'm very much an adherent to more of the laws than most Jews. But what I'm trying to say is that a British person is like, we want Britain the way it used to be. You know, only the Anglican Church, no Muslims, no brown people, just white Britons for Britain. Now, this is a distortion of history, because for the longest time, Britain has never been a place of a single people. It is a collection of many people over time, many of whom weren't white, especially from the Roman legions. There were black people from Africa, Namibia, people from Syria, all across the empire that went with the Romans into the UK, and they raised families there. And after the Romans left, many of them stayed. And the same is, first you have the original Gaelic peoples, the Britons, you know, the Welsh, the Scottish, the Irish, the Cornish, people like that. And then you had the Anglo-Saxons come, okay? And then you had the Vikings come. And then you had the Norman French come. And before that, you had the Latin people. And all of these things make up the identity of what it is to be English. And so this person is taking a distortion of the past and trying to say this is what the past was and this is what we need to return to. See, whenever I say we need to preserve tradition, I'm not saying we need to return to that type of tradition. I say we need to preserve it, learn from it, and hopefully carry it on to new generations, because this is the stuff that makes us who we are as humans. Our tradition is who we are. It is what made us, all the events until this very moment are what make us up. But at the same time, we have to understand that all these moments aren't going to be so clear and are probably going to be distorted, and that we have to treat them deftly. And, you know, this is sort of my trad pill to y'all, my traditional pill. That's what I wanted to talk about. It's a short little stream. I wanted to come out, I know there's been a lot of bad news out today, and I wanted to get something that was a little bit more food for thought, a little bit more useful, something that people can think on, and hopefully speak about it with your comrades, about how tradition doesn't need to be openly and totally rejected, but we need to reanalyze it and synthesize it with historical progress. Thanks, y'all, for watching. Please like and subscribe, share it with your friends. All that really does help. And go check out the Falcon General's channel, Dark Zenobia's channel. Go check out Ramiro's channel. He needs way more subscribers. He's amazing. And, you know, just give love to online communists. Don't feed into any of that drama. And just try to become a better communist yourself. And I'll be doing the same. Solidarity, y'all. I love you. I'll bring this up at my party meeting later. Thank you, Cole. Solidarity, y'all. Serve the people, love the people. I love y'all. Love socialism. Shalom.